Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people to combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Kim Hamer. On April 6, 2009, Kim watched her 44-year-old husband take his last breath. During his illness and after his death, she was amazed at the helpful ways their coworkers, bosses, friends, and family supported them. Kim started calling their kind actions acts of love. After the death of her husband, Kim, who is an HR leader, noticed how little guidance leaders receive when navigating cancer, health crisis, or death in their teams. She knew their lack of knowledge negatively affected morale, employee engagement, and productivity. So she set out to change that. Combining her personal experience with her professional knowledge and leadership skills, Kim launched her business to support leaders and coworkers when cancer or health crises affect a team member. Kim Hamer is the author of 100 Acts of Love, a girlfriend's guide to loving your friends through cancer or loss, an easy to read book filled with 100 practical, quick, and effective ways to support a friend or coworker. She's also an HR leader and speaker who lives in Los Angeles, where she tries not to bother her relatively well-behaved college-age children. So welcome to the show, Kim Hamer. Kim, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Bob, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you asking me to be here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, and I could be saying this wrong based on what we just read in your bio, but I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank
I know
you.
it's been many years, but time never heals something like that. But
Very true. Thank you very much.
sure, if we could tell people about you and how you, I mean, it kind your bio kind of states how you got into what you're doing. But tell us a little bit more about you and what enticed you. Obviously, what you went through kind of grew you into your business, but tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I always like to start with the story of my husband and I sitting in the doctor's office. And the doctor's not talking to us. The doctor's looking at some results on the computer screen and digging through some printouts that he had made and taking notes. And finally, he looks up and he says, "Okay, this is how we're going to go after. This is the treatment plan we're going to go after. You're going to get chemo every other week, and it's going to last. We're going to do it for about 5 months. Then we're going to." So he just kind of talked and talked and talked. And then he said to my husband, "You're not going to be able to work this time. And you can expect to be out of work for about 6 to 7 months. I'll sign whatever paperwork needs." And then he kept talking. And at that point, I stopped listening
Wow.
because we didn't have 6 months of savings in our account at that point.
Right.
Um, so I was like, "Oh my God, how are we going to make this happen?" And my husband was the breadwinner. I was
Mm-hmm.
bringing in extra money, but I was not, we were living off of his salary.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple days later, after a couple nights of very restless sleep, I hear my husband on the phone with his boss, and something about his tone of his voice made me get up and walk into the study and ask him what happened. And as I walked in, he hung up and I said, "What did Tom say?" And he just didn't say anything for a second. And you could imagine, like I feel like
Yeah.
this is the worst thing that's ever happened to our whole entire life, and how are we going to get out of it? He looked at me and he said, "Tom said that they will cover my salary for the time that I'm out." And we both just stopped. Right? I mean, there's more detail to that, but it's just an incredible thing, right?
Yeah.
And so during my husband's entanglement with cancer at that point, something I noticed, we both noticed, is how some people stepped in immediately and knew what to say and knew what to do and kind of move forward
Right.
and were really helpful, while a lot more didn't know what to say and what to do. And some stumbled, and a lot of people backed off and kind of pretended that nothing major was happening. And and then so he was cancer free. It took 8 months
Yeah.
or 7 months, took 7 months. And we're trying to get our lives back together. I mean, I think people have this idea that when you're cancer free, there's this kind of like, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. And for us, it was just sort of looking at each other a lot going, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
what just happened?"
Right.
Like a lot, right? Like,
Right.
did that really,
Uh,
like, did you
yeah.
really just fight for your life? Like, really?
Yeah.
Um, and there's also putting back together a marriage.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah.
roles shifted when he was sick. I had resentments, he had resentments. We had to work through that. So we started to work through that. Our marriage got we kind of built a more solid foundation. And then the cancer came back, and less than 4 months later, he died. And I noticed the same thing again, is some of the same people stepped in, were really
Mhm.
helpful, and other people stepped out. Um, but what happened was those people who did step in, I started calling them acts of love every time they did something, because
Right.
that's what it felt like, right? It was like, here's the lasagna. We love you. We're picking the kids up at 5 today, and we're not bringing them back to you till 9 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday morning. We
Right.
love you. We're taking Art to the cancer treatment center. We love you. So all those things started feeling like acts of love. And it started to be, especially when after he died, it really, those kind things were part of the foundation,
Mhm.
the foundation that I had to rebuild,
Right.
because I was building a whole new life.
Right. Right.
Um, so fast forward a couple years, another 2 years later, I go back to work, and I go back into the HR field, and I work for a man whose wife has cancer, and then she dies.
Wow.
And I sort of take a back seat, because I think that every organization is going to behave the way my husband's organization did. And they didn't. They
Wow.
didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. I remember someone saying, "We need to bring over cold cuts." And I was like, "No, don't bring over food. He's
Yeah.
going to have, everyone is
Mhm.
going to bring over food. Those cold cuts are going to end up in someone else's refrigerator.
Yeah.
Like, don't, you know." And then he came back to work, and he was short tempered, and a lot more short tempered than he ever was before. And I was sort of waiting for someone to say, "Hey, this is how you work with him." And I ended up telling other people, "This is how you work with him. This is what he's
Mhm.
going through. It's
Wow.
not personal. You have to repeat things over and over again, because he's going to forget." So it was at that point I realized, oh, other companies don't know what to do,
Yeah.
what to say. Just, just, it's like, it's, if regular adults don't know what to do or what to say, why did I expect those same adults to know what to do, what to say in the work field,
Right.
in job? So that's how I started. I mean, and someone asked me once, why this thing? And there's really no other way for me to explain it, in that I want to make sure that people know how much they matter to their
Yeah.
friend, their coworker, their employee who is dealing with cancer, and that they do have the ability to make it a little easier. Are
Right.
you going to paint their road into a beautiful yellow brick road? No.
Yeah.
But all those little actions that you take at work, at home, during the day, really do make a difference. They help the person remember that they're cared for, that they're loved, that people are seeing what they're going through, and that people are there to help them.
Wow.
And how that shows up at work is very different than how that shows up at home. So that's sort of, I mean, I don't know if that's the background. That's enough of
That's
a
no,
background, but
that's like I said, the bio kind of explains it too, but that was a very good story. It's, more heartfelt. One reality, I mean, this could be a heavy topic today because as a positive perspective or encouragement, death is not something that's encouraging, but the reality is none of us are here permanently. And we all have to prepare
yeah,
for something, of our, end of time. That's inevitable. So life insurance, health insurance, make sure you have all those key things, your healthcare surrogate, make sure you have that in place, a will, documenting your stuff. Not to belabor that point, but I'm sure, those are the last things you want to try to think about when somebody's going through something like that as well. But one of the things that you mentioned too is, people in a work environment don't get this type of training or anything, which I
yeah,
think is a great aspect that you saw a niche that needs to be filled. I've been through all kinds of corporate training and so forth, and there's nothing like this. And
right.
that's um, a reality because I mean I've had coworkers that have had things like this occur, and yeah, you're either I don't know what to do, or you send a card, you say you're sorry, you try to you know help them any way you can, and I appreciate on your website because you showed that the stack of Tupperware that
Yeah.
were about 8 feet high. Go to our website, you'll see what I mean. You list out the story very well there. But I
Yes.
mean, that's people like you said, it's a small act that they're just trying to help. But when you said it's gonna end up in somebody else's fridge, there it is,
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, people look, it's our go-to. It's what we've learned to do, right? Someone is suffering from a death or cancer, you bring food.
Yeah.
And so I developed what I call a North Star guiding system, which goes through five very specific steps on how you can show up either for your employee
Hmm.
or for your friend. And I think I started working on it to do it for business, but then all of a sudden I was working through it and I'm like, oh, this is exactly what friends need to do too.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and the five steps are, say something,
Hmm.
deal with the feel. I love deal with the feelings that are coming up for you around their situation.
Right.
Assess what you can and cannot do. Assess for work. Assess your employee. Assess the team skills. Assess the company's support system, what they have available. Take thoughtful action,
Right.
and then reflect and repeat.
Hmm. Okay.
So when you think, if you take them apart small like pieces, all right. So the one thing I tell everybody when you talk about say something, what you said, Bob, was perfect. It was perfect. And I would change one thing. I would say if, I would make it more specific. So I'm
Mhm.
sorry for the loss of your husband,
Okay.
right? It's not even my loss. It becomes much more personal, like the loss of my husband. I'm sorry your child died,
Yeah.
right? Things like that. If you know the name, I'm so
Mhm.
sorry Art died, right? If you know the person's name, get in there and say that. It's such a beautiful thing to say.
Okay.
It feels like we're really powerless. It feels like, great, I just said it. I don't feel any better. They probably don't feel any better, but it does make them feel a little better, especially the more personal you can get,
Yeah.
because you are acknowledging what they are going through. And if we tie it into when we come home from work and we've had a bad day, a lot of us just want to talk about the bad day, right? We don't want someone to fix about it. We just want to go, oh my God, George drove me
Yeah.
crazy today. Da, 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 da. But then I did this and I accomplished this and I got the report in. The boss said they really liked it, right? We want someone to witness our feelings.
Right.
And so that's really what you want to think about doing when you talk to somebody. The
Okay.
number one tip I say to everyone, don't say, if you need anything, let me know. Now, I know many of your audience members are probably going, oh,
Yeah, I know. Hindsight. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Hindsight. Yeah. So here's the thing, take the stick, hit yourself with it in the back once, and then
Yeah.
throw it out. You
Right.
didn't know any better.
Right.
And here's why it's not helpful. There are four specific reasons. One, because you're not acknowledging what they're going through.
Right.
You can acknowledge it a little bit by, like, if you need anything, your tone can acknowledge it a little bit, but you're not saying to their face, holy cow, what you're going through sucks.
Yeah.
Right? That's what they need, that
Yeah.
acknowledgement. The second reason it's not helpful is, Bob, what is anything?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. It's not defined.
it's
Yeah.
not defined. I had a toddler when my husband was first sick. Did that mean you were going to take your beautiful, brand new, detailed BMW and drive up to school to pick up my vomiting toddler? Is that what you meant by anything? Or
Right.
did you mean that you'd be happy to drop off a bottle of wine on
Yeah.
Friday night, right? So, and you'd throw in some glasses for fun. So anything is too big a word. The third
Wow.
reason it's not helpful, I mean, that's, yeah, the third reason it's not helpful is you are now asking the person who is like deer in the headlights, what
Mhm.
is going on in my life? Everything is turned upside down. You're asking them to take apart their day and to find one thing that you might be able to help them with. Right.
Right.
So I don't know about you. I mean, I joke. The only reason I know what I had for breakfast is because I don't have breakfast. Usually I start eating at 11.
Yeah.
So, but most of us can't remember what we had for dinner last
Right.
night or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we go through our days as kind of these routines. It's really hard for someone who's under stress to figure out what part of their, like, is it the cereal that you'd be willing to get?
Right.
Like, I put shoes on. My shoelaces broke. Like, I have to remember I have to remember that shoelaces broke, and then I have to remember to mention it to you that
Right.
my shoelaces broke and I need new shoelaces. Which brings us to point number 4. I don't know about you, but most of us are pretty crappy at asking for help.
Yeah.
And so now you've put this person who's already under a great amount of stress. Their lives have been turned upside down. And now you're asking them to make themselves even more vulnerable and to ask you to do something ask you for help to do something that you may not even really want to do.
Right.
There is no way that they are going to risk that unless you are their bestest friend in the whole wide world
Right.
and they will do anything for you. So that's why that's not a great phrase to use.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
I have four other phrases never to say to anyone with cancer, and I tell what to say instead
Okay.
on my website, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about the details of where to find that later. So So that's the first thing. And I always say, just say something. Even if a great thing to say is, I don't know what to say,
Right.
right? The situation is so heartfelt or so heart crippling that it leaves you speechless. And that's such a beautiful thing to say to your friend, because this is happening to say to your coworker, your employee,
Right.
right? My heart hurts for this, that this is happening to you. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing to say. And then the other thing I say is, if you are going to offer help, be specific.
Hmm.
So be really specific and offer more than once. Because, like I said, that person's under crisis. They're probably not going to remember that you offered.
Right.
But if you say again, I am happy to put together the agenda for the next 5 weeks while you're out, or, to take something off your place while you're working, while you have cancer, whatever it is,
Right.
I'm happy to do that for you, and repeat it several times so the person knows. Because what will probably happen is, if it's something they really need, then they'll think it twice, they'll think it 3 times, and the fourth time they'll be like, oh yeah, Bob offered to do that. I know he's willing to do it because he offered it several times. I'm going to be less reticent about asking him because he offered several times. So now I can offer him to do this specific thing. And it's not this big wild thing that I have to come up with.
Right.
So it's really important.
And those are very helpful because I mean that's so critical. We, like you said, when things like this happen, it's hard. We don't know what to say. We're kind of at a loss. We go back to what we've seen maybe our parents do, others do in
Yes.
our lives, things like that. Sometimes, it becomes not so much an emotional thing, because if it's happened a lot or you've experienced a lot, you kind of shove it down and it's okay, this type of normal routine thing I have to do.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that doesn't help somebody feel better. That's that
No, no.
empathy feel that really needs to come out. How can you turn around something like this, if there's a way to, and not to discount what you went through at all, but is there a way to turn around a positive out of this scenario? Is it just from learning? Is
Well,
it
yes, I
strength?
think I think there is. And I'm actually going to tell you number two, because you brought it up. So
Okay.
number two is deal with the feel, right?
Yeah.
We all have feelings and expectations about how, you know what, Bob, I'm so sorry, but it's telling me that my timer is, I've got 8 minutes and
Yeah.
33 seconds. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
we're okay.
Okay. Okay. Good. All right. So what it says is, I say deal with the feel. We all have ideas. If you've never had cancer before and you don't know anyone who has cancer, you still have ideas of what it means to have cancer because you've watched TV or you've been on TikTok or Instagram, right? So you have
Right.
these stereotypes and ideas of what it means to have cancer, what it means to lose somebody, all those things. So I think the thing that is really important is that you sit down and get those things out of your head. Maybe you've had a cancer experience. Maybe someone you cared about died of cancer, and now you're terrified. It's bringing up all those feelings
Right.
about that person who died of cancer. So it's really important you write those things out, because when you don't, they leak out of you. Right. We
Mm.
think, oh, they're just our emotions and we shove them down, they're fine. No, they leak out of you, just like a bad day leaks out of you when you get home. And all of a sudden your cat's a little more scared of you because you're slamming doors. Right.
Yeah.
So these emotions leak out of you. And if you don't take care of them, then you're not able to really support the person to the best of your ability. And that means, there's a thing, I just listened to this incredible podcast about bittersweet.
Mhm.
And I'm never going to tell anyone that the silver lining of my husband's death was the birth of this business,
Right.
because
Right.
it's not congruent,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I will say, I learned so many things from the people around us that
Mhm.
I feel like it's my job to let other people know how to be helpful, because it was so helpful to me. So
Right.
that's how I turned it around, right? So it's no longer, I want people to feel the way that my husband and I and our kids felt when we were being supported. I want people in the workforce to feel that. And I also want people to feel like they have the power to do
Mhm.
something to make things better.
Wow.
Um, so I think in turning it around is, it doesn't happen quickly.
Right.
I think that
Yeah.
we need to kind of acknowledge, like, there's not, like, I love the word resilient and I try really hard to raise my kids to be resilient individuals, but that doesn't mean that they hit the ground, they bounce right back up.
No. Yeah.
You
It
know,
hurts. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It hurts. And I think it's just having faith
Yeah.
that this situation that you're in is going to get better and it's teaching you something that's going to make your life better.
Right. Right.
When my husband died, I started counting days. And my friend said that feels like kind of yucky. Like it's 5 days since your husband died, 10 days, like you're. And I realized I was counting because I knew that at some point, somewhere along the line, didn't know what day it was going to be, I wouldn't feel as horrible and as
Right.
bereft as I felt on the early days.
Right.
So when, the early days were really important that I counted. When I got to month 6, I was still counting. I was having, better days.
Yeah.
But when I hit those really hard moments, I would remember that, right, this is why you're counting, because this is a hard day. It's
Yeah.
just a hard day. It doesn't mean it's the end. It's just a hard day. Day 1025 is going to be better than day 1024, I hope.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think understanding that and having that, having that faith, and I'm not
Yeah.
talking about God spiritual faith, I'm just having the faith in your own ability to recover,
Right.
um, is
That's a good
really
perspective. I mean,
key.
it's, you forget about that, this too shall pass, if you will, but it does, but it doesn't. You get a little stronger each day. The memory, everything's still there in your heart, but, getting through what you need to get through, each day is a little bit stronger and a little bit easier. So that's, if there's anything that could come out of it, that growth and that learning, that strength, I think would be one of those scenarios like you're talking about.
I agree. I agree. I also don't want people saying, well, God doesn't give you more than you can handle,
Yeah.
or those kind of things,
It's not
because
on
it's
your
not.
list of things to say, is it?
It's not my list of things to say. Exactly, exactly. And I think the thing to remember is it's not our job to point out that they will learn from this. It's the person's job who's going through it to discover what they're going to learn.
Right.
So pointing it out to them that, they're going to be fine is basically what you're doing is you're saying, oh, what you're going through is no big deal. It's no big deal that your
Right.
child died. It's no big deal that you have cancer. It's no big deal that you lost your job. No big deal. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
And that's not what the moment calls for. The moment calls for you're acknowledging their loss at whatever it is, right? Their loss of the
Yeah.
life that they thought they had, the loss of divorce, the whatever it is, the loss of the marriage. It's your job to support them and help them find that place of, oh, this is what I learned from it. But you're not there pointing it out and being like, hey, don't worry about it. It's all. If someone came up to me and said, couple months, I think it was a couple of weeks after Art died, I never remember the time frame. Kim, you don't have to really worry because you're young and you'll have plenty of time to be remarried. And I was like, oh, so now I don't need to
That's
grieve
it.
my husband. Of course,
Wow.
I feel so
Yeah.
much better now. And they meant well by it. They
Well,
wanted to make me feel better, but it's not their job. It's not your job as the audience member to make someone who's going through something feel better. It's your job to just to hold the space for them to feel like crap so they can
right.
discover what they need to do and then come back.
Okay. Well, before we run out of time, because we are running low on time, but let's tell people where they can find your information. And I got to give you kudos on your website. People review her website after she tells you what it is
Oh,
because the story is there in detail. I had to hold back some tears listening to that, seeing the pictures. Good honor to your husband, to Art,
thank
and what
you.
you went through. But it gives a good breadth of what you do. But if you can, tell people where they can find out more about you.
Sure. They can find out more at 100actsoflove.com, and that's the number 100. So 100actsoflove.com. And if you want the free download of four other phrases never to say to anyone dealing with cancer, loss, or anything, and what to say instead, you go to 100actsoflove.com/what not to say. No spaces, no capitals, what not to say. And then you can always find me on Instagram at 100 Acts of Love. And please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do LinkedIn Lives every Thursday, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Kim, well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your attitude towards all this, and thank you for sharing this with the audience. I really appreciate it. The insight for me has been very good as well. So thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. It's a great idea.
Thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.